The envelope arrived at dusk. Jennifer Vale knew it was from Moonridge before she even touched it. The silver wax seal carried the beta's crest, a crescent blade wrapped around a wolf's head. Once, that symbol had made her heart race. Now it made her stomach twist. She stood still in the courtyard of Blackthorn territory, the wind brushing softly against her dark hair. The sun dipped low, staining the sky in shades of bruised orange and fading gold. Somewhere behind her, two small voices laughed bright, warm, alive. Her sons. She did not turn toward them. Not yet. Because the past had just knocked on her door. Slowly, she broke the seal. The paper inside was thick, formal, cold. You are invited to attend the mating ceremony of Beta Jareth Draven. Her fingers tightened slightly. Invited. The audacity. 5 years ago, Jareth Draven had stood in front of the entire Moonridge pack and rejected her beneath the full moon. Rejected her not in private, not gently, but publicly, brutally. Jennifer Vale, he had said, his voice echoing across the ceremonial grounds. I refuse this mate bond. I cannot tie my future to a barren wolf. Barren. That word had shattered something inside her that night. It had not just been the loss of him. It had been the humiliation, the whispers, the looks of pity, the elders shaking their heads as if she were defective. Jareth had not defended her. He had not questioned the healer's rushed judgment. He had simply accepted it, because ambition mattered more. A beta without heirs would never become alpha, and a mate who could not conceive was a weakness he refused to carry. Jennifer folded the invitation slowly. 5 years ago, that rejection had nearly destroyed her. She had left Moonridge with nothing but a small travel bag and a cracked heart. No pack, no title, no mate bond, just silence. And snow. She remembered walking through the frozen forest that night, the cold biting her skin, her wolf howling in agony at the severed connection. It had felt like someone tore a part of her soul out and left it bleeding on the ground. She had thought she would die from the pain. But fate had other plans. Behind her, small feet padded across stone. Mother? The soft voice pulled her back to the present. She turned. 2 identical boys stood a few steps away, silver eyes bright like moonlight caught in glass, dark hair, strong brows, proud little shoulders, already carrying the quiet dominance of alpha blood. Her heart softened instantly. Yes, my stars? She asked gently. Who sent that? One of them asked, tilting his head. Jennifer hesitated. Before she could answer, a deep, calm voice spoke from behind her. Moonridge. The single word carried quiet authority. Jennifer didn't need to turn to know who stood there. Alpha Ronan Blackthorn. He moved like a shadow with weight steady, powerful, never rushed. His presence alone could silence a room. Not because he demanded attention, but because he commanded it without trying. He stepped closer, his gaze briefly flickering to the envelope in her hand before settling on her face. There was no jealousy in his eyes. No insecurity, only awareness. They're inviting you, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Jennifer met his gaze. Jareth's mating ceremony. For a brief second, something dark flashed in Ronan's eyes. Not anger, not rage, something colder. Disdain. And he wants you there, Ronan concluded. She gave a faint, almost amused smile. To watch him claim someone he believes is more suitable. Silence stretched between them. The boys sensed the shift and moved closer to Ronan instinctively. One of them grabbed his hand. Ronan's large fingers curled around the child's small ones without hesitation. Protective, natural, unshaken. 5 years ago, she had been cast aside as worthless. Now she stood beside the most respected alpha in the Northern Territories. And she carried his heirs. The irony almost made her laugh. You don't have to go, Ronan said finally. He would never command her in matters like this. That was something she loved about him. He gave her choice. Always. Jennifer looked back at the invitation. 5 years of silence. 5 years of growth. 5 years of healing. Did she want revenge? No. Revenge required bitterness, and she had already shed that skin. But closure? That was different. I think, she said slowly, it's time they see the truth. Ronan studied her carefully. Not to judge, not to control, but to understand. And what truth is that? He asked softly. Her fingers drifted down to rest over her abdomen, a habit she still carried, even though years had passed since her pregnancy. That I was never barren. The wind shifted, lifting the edge of her dress. The boys looked between their parents, confused but curious. Ronan stepped closer until he stood directly in front of her. He did not touch her immediately. He never took without invitation. Will this hurt you? He asked quietly. It was not about pride, not about territory, only about her. Jennifer held his gaze. 5 years ago, Jareth had chosen status over love. Ronan had chosen her when she had nothing. She shook her head gently. No, she whispered. It won't. A pause. Then, softer. It will remind me how far I've come. For a long moment, Ronan simply looked at her. And then he did something simple. He reached up and brushed his thumb lightly against her cheek. Not possessive, not dramatic, just grounding. Then we will go, he said. Not you. We. The word settled warm inside her chest. Behind them, the twins began arguing over who would ride the larger warhorse on the journey. Jennifer laughed softly. 5 years ago, she had walked away from Moonridge alone. Broken, humiliated, ashamed. This time, she would return as an alpha's mate, as a mother, and as living proof that the moon does not curse without reason. Sometimes, it simply waits for the right soil to bloom, and Moonridge was about to learn the difference. The full moon had never looked so cruel. It hung high above Moonridge like a silent witness, pale, distant, indifferent. Jennifer remembered how tightly she had held Jareth's hand that night. Her palms had been cold, not from the wind, from fear. The ceremonial grounds were packed. Wolves from neighboring territories had gathered. Torches lined the stone circle where mate bonds were usually celebrated, blessed beneath the moon, sealed with pride. But something felt wrong. Jareth had been distant all week. Short answers, avoided touches, eyes that slid away instead of meeting hers. Still, she had trusted him, because he was her mate. And mates didn't abandon each other, right? She glanced at him, now tall, proud, dressed in ceremonial black. The beta's crest gleamed on his chest. He looked magnificent, untouchable, ambitious. The elders stood before them. The healer lingered near the edge of the circle, face unreadable. Then the elder cleared his throat. Jennifer Vale, he announced. It has been brought to the council's attention that your body shows signs of infertility. A ripple of murmurs spread instantly. Jennifer froze. What? She whispered. Her heart started pounding so loudly she could barely hear the rest. The healer stepped forward, but did not meet her eyes. The signs are consistent, he said carefully. Her wolf shows no fertility markers. It is unlikely she can bear offspring. Unlikely. Not impossible. But the word barely mattered. Because in a pack built on bloodlines and heirs, unlikely was enough to ruin a future. Jennifer turned to Jareth. Confusion filled her eyes. You said it was just stress, she breathed. You said we would retest. Jareth didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead. Jaw tight. Expression carved from stone. The elder's voice cut through the silence. Beta Jareth Draven, knowing this, do you still accept this mate bond? The world stopped. The question should not have been asked in public. It should have been private, handled with dignity. But ambition had a way of stripping kindness away. Jennifer's fingers tightened around Jareth's sleeve. He finally looked at her. And for one fragile second, she saw conflict, a flicker, a hesitation. Her heart clung to it desperately. He loved her. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't. I refuse this bond. The words fell like a blade. Clean, sharp, final. Gasps erupted. The mate bond snapped inside her chest. Not gently, violently. It felt like something invisible tore straight through her ribs. Her wolf screamed inside her mind, a sound so raw she nearly collapsed. Jennifer staggered backward. Jareth, her voice cracked. Please, this can't be how you... I will not chain my future to weakness, he said coldly. Weakness. The word echoed louder than Barren ever could. 5 years of love, gone in one sentence. You once said I was your strength, she whispered, barely audible. He didn't soften. I need heirs, he replied. I need a Luna who can give me sons. The humiliation was suffocating. Whispers circled the stone grounds like vultures. She can't conceive? That's tragic. Poor Beta. Poor Beta. Not poor Jennifer. Not the girl whose heart was being ripped apart in front of hundreds. Jareth stepped back from her, physically distancing himself. As if she were already nothing. As if she had already faded from his future. The elder raised his staff. Then, by the authority of the Moonridge Council, this mate bond is hereby rejected. The final word sealed it. The invisible thread that once tied her soul to his burned into ash. The pain was unbearable. She dropped to her knees. Not because she was weak, but because the bond severing felt like death. Tears blurred her vision. Still, she did not beg again. Something inside her, even through the agony, refused to shatter completely. Jareth didn't step toward her, didn't reach out, didn't apologize. He turned his back and walked away. Just like that. Ambition over love, title over tenderness, power over promise. And in that moment, Jennifer understood something devastating. He hadn't chosen this in panic. He had already decided. This ceremony wasn't about revelation. It was about justification. He needed the healer's words to free himself. And she had been foolish enough to trust him. The crowd slowly dispersed. No one offered comfort. Some avoided looking at her altogether. A rejected mate was considered unstable, broken, unfortunate. She remained kneeling long after the torches dimmed. Long after Jareth disappeared from sight. The moon still hung overhead, cold, silent, watching. Eventually, she forced herself to stand. Her chest ached where the bond used to hum softly with warmth. Now there was nothing, just emptiness. She walked back to the small house they had once shared, his scent already fading, his belongings untouched. He hadn't even waited to speak to her privately, didn't care enough to explain. Inside, she packed one bag. Not much belonged to her anyway. A few dresses, her mother's necklace. A book Jareth once said reminded him of her. She hesitated over it, then left it behind. Some memories weren't worth carrying. When she stepped outside again, snow had begun to fall. Soft, quiet, cold. The pack gates loomed ahead. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. She crossed the border alone, each step heavier than the last. And when she reached the forest beyond Moonridge territory, her wolf howled. Not in rage, not in vengeance, but in grief, a sound so raw it echoed between the trees like a broken soul searching for something it had lost. Jennifer thought that night would be the end of her story, that she would fade into obscurity, that the word Barren would follow her forever. She didn't know then that the moon sometimes removes what does not deserve you. That rejection can be redirection. That one alpha's ambition would lead her into the arms of a man who valued her heart before her womb. But that night, all she felt was cold and heartbreak, and the cruel echo of the man who once promised to love her, choosing power over her. The forest beyond Moonridge was unforgiving. Winter had settled deep into the trees, coating branches in frost and silence. The farther Jennifer walked, the thinner her strength became. The mate bond severing had left more than emotional damage. It had drained her wolf. Each breath felt sharp in her lungs, each step heavier than the last. By the second night, snow clung to her hair and lashes. Her boots were soaked, her fingers numb. She hadn't eaten properly, hadn't slept. Grief and cold were a dangerous combination. When she finally collapsed, it wasn't dramatic. No scream, no cry for help. Just her knees giving way beneath her. The world tilted, darkness crept in, and she truly believed that was where her story would end. She woke to warmth, not blazing heat, but controlled warmth. Steady, safe. The first thing she noticed was the scent. Earth, cedar wood, and something stronger beneath it, dominance. Her eyes fluttered open. Stone walls surrounded her. A large fireplace crackled near the far corner. Thick furs covered her body. She was inside, alive. Her wolf stirred weakly, sensing power nearby. Then she saw him. He stood near the window, tall and unmoving, back partially turned toward her. Broad shoulders, dark clothing, a presence that filled the room without effort. He didn't rush toward her when she moved, didn't panic, didn't crowd. He simply spoke. "You're awake." His voice was deep, not loud, but it carried weight. Jennifer tried to sit up too quickly. Pain shot through her ribs. "Easy," he said calmly. Not a command. A warning. She swallowed. "Where am I?" Blackthorn territory. The name hit her slowly. Blackthorn. One of the strongest packs in the northern region. And its alpha? Ronan Blackthorn. Her breath hitched slightly. He turned fully toward her now. Silver eyes met hers. Not sharp with suspicion. Not burning with accusation. Just observant. Calculating. "You crossed my border 2 nights ago," he said evenly. Collapsed near the east ridge. Embarrassment burned her cheeks. "I didn't mean to trespass." "You weren't trespassing." A slight pause. "You were dying." He said it plainly. No dramatics. No cruelty. Just fact. Jennifer looked down at her hands, wrapped in clean bandages. "Why help me?" she asked quietly. It wasn't distrust. It was confusion. A rejected mate. Alone. Weak. Unclaimed. She was a liability. Most alphas would have sent her away immediately. Ronan held her gaze. "Because you needed help." That simple. No hidden agenda in his tone. No suggestion of debt. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. After weeks of whispers and pity and quiet disgust, after the public rejection, after being treated like broken goods, he had answered with something so simple it almost hurt. Human decency. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He didn't interrogate her, didn't demand her story. He simply studied her condition the way a leader assesses terrain carefully, thoroughly. "You're healing," he added. Slowly. She nodded faintly. Her body felt drained, but stable. "You can stay until you regain your strength," he continued. "After that, you're free to choose where you go. Free to choose." Another unfamiliar kindness. She hesitated. "You don't want to know why I was alone?" His expression didn't change. "If you wish to tell me, you will." No pressure. No digging. Just quiet respect. Something inside her cracked not painfully this time. Softly. Like ice melting. Days passed. Ronan kept his distance physically. He visited once each morning, once each evening, to check her condition, to ensure she was eating, to confirm the healer's herbs were working. Never once did he look at her with curiosity about her defect. Never once did he ask about fertility, or heirs, or usefulness. He treated her like a wolf, not a failure. On the 4th evening, she finally spoke first. "They said I'm barren." The words felt strange, leaving her mouth without trembling. Ronan leaned back slightly in his chair. "And?" She blinked. "And?" she repeated. His silver eyes remained steady. "Does that change who you are?" Her lips parted slightly. No one had ever responded like that. Ever. She swallowed. "It changes everything." "For them," he corrected quietly. A heavy silence followed. Then, "For me," he added, "it changes nothing." The words settled deep inside her chest. Not romantic, not dramatic, but powerful. Because he meant them. He didn't offer comfort. He offered perspective. And for the first time since the rejection, she didn't feel defective. She felt seen. Over the following weeks, strength returned to her limbs. Color returned to her cheeks. She began walking through Blackthorn territory during daylight. No one mocked her. No one whispered. The pack members bowed respectfully when Ronan passed and nodded politely when she walked beside him. He never introduced her as a burden. Never explained her presence defensively. He simply allowed her to exist. And that quiet acceptance healed more than medicine ever could. One evening, as snow melted into early spring rain, she stood near the training grounds watching young wolves spar. Ronan approached, stopping beside her. "You fight?" he asked. She almost smiled. "I used to." "Show me." A challenge. Not to embarrass, but to test. Her wolf stirred with interest. Minutes later, she stood opposite him in the dirt clearing. She expected him to overpower her easily. But he didn't rush. He moved carefully, testing her reflexes, adjusting to her pace. When she lunged, he blocked but never struck to harm. When she stumbled, he steadied but never pitied. After several breathless minutes, she found herself pinned lightly against the ground, his forearm braced beside her head. He could have ended it in seconds. He hadn't. Their eyes met. Not heated, not charged, but aware. "You are not weak," he said quietly. It wasn't flirtation. It was observation. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. For the first time in months, something inside her felt alive. Not because a male desired her, but because someone acknowledged her strength. He stood and offered his hand. She took it, and when he pulled her to her feet, she realized something quietly monumental. The mate bond she lost had been built on expectation. What she was building now was built on choice. And for the first time since the moonlit rejection, Jennifer Vale felt like more than a discarded title. She felt like herself again. She didn't know yet that destiny had already begun rewriting her story. She didn't know her body would soon prove the healer wrong. She didn't know she would one day return to Moonridge, not as the rejected Barren mate, but as the mother of alpha heirs. For now, all she knew was this: Ronan Blackthorn did not see weakness. He saw her, and that changed everything. Spring arrived gently in Blackthorn territory. The snow melted into streams that ran clear and bright between the trees. The air softened, the pack moved with lighter steps. And Jennifer felt different. At first, she blamed it on healing. Her strength had returned. She trained again. She helped in the herb gardens. She laughed more easily. But something beneath the surface was changing. Subtle, persistent. She tired faster than usual. Certain scents overwhelmed her senses. Her wolf, once subdued after the rejection, felt restless, almost protective. One morning, while walking back from the training grounds, dizziness hit her suddenly. The world tilted, her knees nearly buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Ronan. He had been several paces behind her, speaking to one of his warriors. He moved faster than anyone expected. "Jennifer." Her name left his mouth low and controlled, but there was unmistakable tension beneath it. "I'm fine," she murmured automatically. She wasn't. He didn't argue. He simply lifted her into his arms. Not dramatically, not possessively, but decisively. She was too light in his hold. That fact alone darkened his expression. Within minutes, the pack healer was summoned. Jennifer sat on the edge of a wooden bed inside the healer's quarters, trying to steady her breathing while Ronan stood nearby, silent, watchful. The healer, an older she-wolf with wise golden eyes, placed gentle hands over Jennifer's abdomen. Her expression shifted almost instantly. Surprise. Then confusion. Then something close to awe. She pressed again, closed her eyes, listened carefully. The room felt unbearably quiet. Ronan's posture changed subtly, shoulders tightening, gaze sharpening. "What is it?" he asked calmly. The healer opened her eyes slowly. "She is not ill." Relief flickered across Jennifer's face. Then the healer added, "She is with child." Silence. Absolute silence. The words seemed to hang in the air, refusing to settle. Jennifer blinked. "No," she whispered automatically. It was impossible. She had been declared barren. Publicly. Officially. Humiliatingly. The healer's voice remained steady. "There are 2 heartbeats." The world stopped. 2. Jennifer's hand moved to her abdomen without thinking. 2 heartbeats. Her breath grew shallow. "I was told." "I can't." Her voice broke. The healer shook her head gently. "You were told wrong." Ronan had not spoken yet. He had not moved. But something powerful shifted in the room. He stepped closer, his silver eyes fixed on Jennifer, not with doubt, not with calculation, but with quiet intensity. "Are you certain?" he asked the healer. "Yes, Alpha." There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Ronan's gaze returned to Jennifer. Slowly, carefully, as if she might break under the weight of this revelation. Her eyes shimmered, not from weakness, from disbelief. "All this time," she whispered. She remembered the rejection ceremony, the healer from Moonridge, the word Barren, spoken like a verdict. Had they been wrong? Or had Jareth simply chosen not to question it? Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't bitter. They were something else. Vindication. Ronan lowered himself to one knee in front of her, and Alpha kneeling. Not out of submission, but closeness. He did not touch her immediately. He waited. She looked at him through tear-blurred vision. "I thought I was broken," she said quietly. "You are not broken," he replied just as softly. No grand speech, no dramatic oath, just truth. Her fingers trembled as she placed his hand over her abdomen. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, connected by something deeper than instinct. Not a fated mate bond forced by the moon, but a choice. A connection built slowly. And now, life. Ronan exhaled slowly. 2 heartbeats, his heirs. But what filled his chest was not pride, not triumph. It was something far more dangerous. Protectiveness. He looked at her differently now. Not because she could bear children, but because she had believed she never would. And she had survived anyway. "You do not owe anyone this news," he said quietly. She knew who he meant. Moonridge. Jareth. The past. But Jennifer shook her head slowly. "No," she agreed. "I don't." Still, a thought formed in her mind. A ceremony invitation sealed in silver wax. Jareth preparing to claim another she-wolf because his future required heirs. Because she had been deemed useless. Because he had chosen power. Her tears dried gradually. Her breathing steadied. For the first time since the rejection, the shame completely disappeared. She had not been barren. She had never been the problem. She had simply been planted in the wrong soil, and her body had refused to bloom in a bond built on ambition instead of love. Ronan rose slowly. His expression shifted from softness to quiet resolve. "Blackthorn will protect you," he said. "Always. Not because she carried his heirs, but because she was his, by choice." Jennifer stood carefully and faced him. There was no dramatic confession, no rushed declaration, just an understanding. "We will go to Moonridge," she said calmly. It wasn't revenge in her voice. It was clarity. Ronan studied her for several seconds. "Are you certain?" "Yes." A pause. They deserved to see what they cast away. Not for pride, not for humiliation, but for truth. Ronan nodded once. "Then we will go." "We." Again. The word wrapped around her heart gently. That night, Jennifer lay awake longer than usual. Her hand rested over her abdomen. 2 heartbeats. Proof that destiny is not dictated by impatient men. Proof that the moon does not make mistakes. Some lessons take time. Some truths take courage. And sometimes, a woman must lose everything to discover she was never lacking at all. Moonridge believed she had nothing to offer. They were about to learn. She carried the future. The road back to Moonridge felt shorter than it once had. 5 years ago, Jennifer had crossed these same woods with snow biting her skin and heartbreak tearing through her chest. Tonight, spring air brushed gently against her face. And she did not walk alone. The carriage moved steadily along the forest path, Blackthorn warriors riding ahead and behind. Not in aggression but in quiet strength, their silver insignias glinted beneath the moonlight. Inside the carriage, Jennifer sat upright, her fingers resting lightly over her abdomen. Across from her, 2 small boys leaned against each other, whispering about who would shift first when they grew older. Her sons. Strong, bright, alpha-born. And beside her, seated in calm silence, was Ronan Blackthorn. He did not fill the space with unnecessary words. He didn't attempt to reassure her repeatedly. He simply sat there, solid and unshakable like a mountain beside her. But he was watching her. Not obviously. Just enough to notice the slight tightening of her jaw as the Moonridge border came into view. The stone archway, marking the pack's territory, rose ahead. 5 years ago, she had crossed it broken. Tonight, torches burned bright on either side. The guards at the gate stiffened when they saw Blackthorn insignias. One of them rushed forward. "Alpha Ronan," the guard greeted carefully, bowing his head. "We were not informed of your arrival." "You are now," Ronan replied evenly. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The authority within it carried more weight than shouting ever could. The guard's eyes shifted toward the carriage. Toward her. Recognition struck slowly. His face drained of color. "Jennifer?" Whispers began immediately. Like wind moving through dry leaves. She stepped down from the carriage gracefully. Her dark gown flowed around her ankles. Not overly extravagant, but undeniably refined. Blackthorn craftsmanship. Elegant. Commanding. She did not lower her gaze. Did not shrink. The guard swallowed. "Beta Jareth's ceremony is underway." "Yes," Jennifer replied softly. "That is why I am here." The words were calm, but they carried meaning. The gates opened. Moonridge's central courtyard glowed ahead, decorated with gold banners and ceremonial lanterns. Music drifted through the air celebratory, proud. They were moments away from sealing a new bond, from crowning a new future. Jennifer walked forward. Ronan beside her, their sons between them, and Blackthorn warriors trailing at a respectful distance. As they approached the ceremonial grounds, the music faltered. One by one, wolves turned. Recognition spread like wildfire. Gasps. Murmurs. "Is that?" She came back? With Blackthorn? The crowd parted instinctively. Not because she demanded it, but because Ronan's presence made them move. At the center of the courtyard stood Jareth Draven, dressed in ceremonial black once more. 5 years older. Stronger in build. But his ambition still shone clearly in his posture. Beside him stood his chosen mate, a beautiful she-wolf draped in silver silk, her hand resting proudly on his arm. Jareth was smiling, confident, until he saw her. The smile didn't fade immediately. It froze, then slowly cracked. His gaze dropped to the 2 boys walking between her and Ronan. Identical, silver-eyed, dark-haired, strong posture despite their young age. The resemblance to Ronan was unmistakable. The resemblance to him? Non-existent. Silence swallowed the courtyard whole. The elder holding the ceremonial staff cleared his throat awkwardly. "This ceremony is private." "No," Ronan interrupted smoothly. "It is public, as all important decisions should be." His tone wasn't hostile. It was factual. Jareth stepped forward slowly. "Jennifer?" he said, her name tight in his throat. She inclined her head politely. "Beta. Not Jareth. Not former mate. Beta. A title. Nothing more." His eyes flickered over her, taking in the healthy glow of her skin, the calm confidence in her stance, the protective way the 2 boys stood near her. "You received my invitation," he said stiffly. "I did. And you decided to attend." "Yes." The simplicity of her answers unsettled him more than anger would have. He forced a small laugh. "I didn't expect you to bring company." Ronan's gaze shifted to him. Cool. Measured. "I go where my mate goes." The word mate struck like thunder. The courtyard erupted in whispers. "Mate? She has a mate? With Blackthorn?" Jareth's fiancée stiffened beside him. Her grip on his arm tightened slightly. His jaw flexed. "You were declared Barren," he said quietly, almost accusingly. Jennifer held his gaze without blinking. "I was declared incorrectly." The elder's face paled. Jareth's eyes darted toward the twins again. 2 small hands gripped her fingers. Protective. Unafraid. "How old are they?" Jareth asked, before he could stop himself. 4, she replied. The calculation hit him instantly. 4 years. Which meant she had conceived shortly after leaving Moonridge. Shortly after the rejection. His rejection. Impossible, he muttered. Ronan stepped slightly closer to Jennifer, not possessively, but firmly. There is nothing impossible about truth, he said evenly. Jareth's fiancé pulled her arm free now. You said she couldn't bear children, she whispered sharply. That's what the healer said, Jareth snapped defensively. Jennifer's gaze shifted toward the Moonridge healer, standing near the elders. The older wolf looked visibly uncomfortable. You never asked for a second examination, Jennifer said quietly. The accusation wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Jareth's expression darkened. You accepted it because it benefited you, she continued calmly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The truth, spoken plainly, often hurts more than shouting. Jareth opened his mouth to respond. But one of the twins stepped forward unexpectedly, his silver eyes fixed directly on Jareth. You made my mother cry, the child said bluntly. The courtyard froze. Jennifer felt her breath hitch. Ronan placed a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. Not silencing him, just grounding him. Jareth stared at the child. And for the first time since she arrived, he looked uncertain. Not angry. Not proud. Uncertain. Because the future he once rejected stood right in front of him. Healthy. Powerful. Alpha-born. And not his. The elder attempted to regain control. This is inappropriate. No, Jennifer said softly. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried. For 5 years, this pack believed I was defective. Her gaze swept across the crowd. I left quietly. I accepted the shame placed upon me. Silence deepened, but I was never barren. The words settled heavily. You chose not to question the verdict, she said to Jareth, because it gave you freedom. Jareth's fiancé stepped backward slightly, the confidence in her eyes fading. The narrative she had been told, cracking. Ronan's voice entered calmly. A leader who abandons loyalty for convenience does not strengthen a pack. It wasn't a threat. It was an observation. Jareth's pride bristled. This is my territory. And yet, Ronan replied smoothly, your ceremony has paused because of a woman you discarded. The truth struck harder than any insult. Jareth looked at Jennifer again. And this time, there was something different in his eyes. Regret. Not loud. Not dramatic. But present. He saw what she had become. Graceful. Strong. Chosen by an alpha far more respected than he was. Mother of heirs that radiated dominance. Everything he once feared losing now stood beyond his reach. You could have waited, he said quietly. For what? She asked. For certainty. She almost smiled. I waited for love, she replied. And you chose ambition. The words landed with finality. Jareth had no response. None that would repair what he had broken. The courtyard felt heavy now. Celebration replaced by tension. Jareth's fiancée slowly removed her hand from his arm entirely. You told me she was weak, she said softly. Jennifer didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her existence was answer enough. Ronan turned slightly toward her. Are you ready? He asked gently. She looked around Moonridge one last time. At the pack that once whispered about her flaws. At the beta who valued status over loyalty. At the courtyard where she had knelt in heartbreak. And she realized something unexpected. She felt nothing. No rage. No longing. No pain. Just clarity. Yes, she said. Ronan offered his hand. She took it. Together, with their sons between them, they turned toward the gates. Behind them, the ceremony remained unfinished. Uncertain. Shaken. Jareth stood beneath flickering lantern light. Alone in the space where his future was meant to be sealed. Because some losses are quiet, and some mistakes echo forever. As Jennifer crossed Moonridge's border once more, she did not look back. This time, she left not as the rejected barren mate, but as living proof that the moon does not make mistakes. It simply redirects the worthy. The music never resumed. Even after Jennifer and Ronan crossed the Moonridge gates and disappeared beyond torchlight, the courtyard remained suspended in silence. Jareth stood exactly where she had left him. ceremonial black robes now feeling heavier than armor. The crowd had begun to disperse in hushed clusters, their whispers far sharper than any blade. She was never Barren. He didn't even question it? Blackthorn's heirs. The resemblance to Ronan. Every murmur landed like a strike against his pride. Across the courtyard, the elders gathered in tense discussion. The healer avoided eye contact entirely, and the she-wolf, who had been moments away from becoming his mate, stepped back from him. "You said she was weak," Celine said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Jareth finally looked at her. "She was declared infertile," he answered stiffly. "That changes things." "No," Celine replied, meeting his gaze directly. "It changed your ambition." The distinction hit harder than she intended. Jareth's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" Her eyes flicked toward the gate where Jennifer had exited. "Because what I saw tonight wasn't weakness." He didn't respond. Because he couldn't deny it. Jennifer hadn't looked broken. She hadn't looked ashamed. She hadn't even looked angry. She looked fulfilled, and that unsettled him more than fury ever could. Celine took another step back. "I will not stand beside a beta who discards loyalty when it becomes inconvenient." The words were calm. "Final. This ceremony is over." And with that, she turned and walked away, just like Jennifer had 5 years ago. Except this time, the courtyard was watching. Jareth remained standing alone beneath flickering lanterns. For the first time since his rejection ceremony years ago, the crowd wasn't whispering about her. They were whispering about him. Beyond Moonridge territory, the air felt different. Cleaner. Lighter. Jennifer inhaled deeply as the blackthorn horses moved steadily along the forest path. She hadn't realized how tense her shoulders had been until they passed the border. Ronan rode beside her, their sons ahead on a larger horse, arguing softly about which of them had spoken more bravely in the courtyard. "You were shaking," Ronan said quietly. It wasn't accusation, just observation. "Not from fear," she replied. He glanced at her. "From memory." She nodded faintly. That place held pain for a long time. And now? She considered it. It holds nothing. The honesty surprised even her. Ronan studied her face carefully. He wasn't looking for weakness. He was looking for truth. When he found it, something in his posture eased. "Good," he murmured. He didn't ask if she felt vindicated. He didn't ask if she felt triumphant. Because Ronan understood something Jareth never had. Closure is not about proving others wrong. It's about releasing what no longer owns you. Back in Moonridge, Jareth sat alone in his private quarters, long after the courtyard emptied. The ceremonial torches outside burned low. His mind replayed the scene again and again. The twins. Silver eyes. Strong posture. Protective instinct. He had seen alpha blood before. He recognized it instantly. Those boys would grow into leaders. Feared. Respected. And they would never carry his name. He poured himself a drink. It did nothing to quiet the restless ache building inside his chest. Not the mate bond pain. That had faded years ago. This was something else. Something slower. He remembered Jennifer's face the night he rejected her. Tear-streaked. Shattered. Still dignified. He had told himself it was necessary. Practical. Strategic. A beta without heirs could not rise. A barren mate was a liability. But tonight, standing across from her, he saw something he hadn't expected. Strength. Not the fragile girl who once clung to his sleeve, but a woman who stood beside a stronger alpha without shrinking. She hadn't returned to beg. She hadn't returned to mock him. She had returned because she no longer feared him. And that realization cut deeper than rejection ever could. A knock sounded at his door. "Enter." The Moonridge healer stepped inside, hesitant. Jareth's expression darkened. "You were wrong." The healer swallowed. "I made a judgment based on early signs. You humiliated my mate." The words slipped out before he could stop them. "My mate." The healer blinked slightly. "You rejected her," the healer corrected gently. Jareth stood abruptly. "Because you declared her barren." "And you never asked me to retest?" the healer replied quietly. The truth settled heavily between them. Jareth had wanted a reason, and when one presented itself, he accepted it. Conveniently, the healer lowered his gaze. Her wolf was under extreme stress. The bond between you was unstable. Jareth froze. What do you mean? She was anxious, fearful, strained. He remembered the distance he had begun placing between them, the long nights away from home, the ambition consuming his focus, the quiet arguments about the future. He had already begun detaching before the diagnosis ever came. She might not have conceived because her body rejected uncertainty, the healer added. The implication was undeniable. It wasn't weakness. It was instinct. Jareth dismissed the healer abruptly. When the door shut, the room felt smaller, colder. He sank back into his chair slowly. If what the healer implied was true, then Jennifer's body hadn't failed. He had. Days passed. Moonridge buzzed with unrest. The cancelled ceremony became a topic in every corner. Selene formally withdrew from the engagement. Elders questioned Jareth's judgment, and neighboring packs began whispering about instability within Moonridge leadership. Blackthorn, meanwhile, remained silent. No retaliation, no mockery, just strength, which made the contrast worse. Jareth stood on the training grounds one afternoon, watching younger warriors spar. He remembered training Jennifer once. She had been fast, determined, fierce in her own way. He had admired that about her, until it threatened his carefully planned future. A small voice echoed faintly in his memory. "You made my mother cry." The child's words lingered heavier than the elder's criticism, because that accusation carried no politics, just truth. For the first time in years, Jareth allowed himself to sit with the reality he had avoided. He had not rejected her because she was barren. He had rejected her because she complicated his ambition. And now, the very thing he chased stood hollow in his hands. Title without loyalty, authority without respect, future without warmth. He stared toward the northern forest, toward Blackthorn territory, toward the life he had once dismissed as weakness, and understood something brutal. Some losses cannot be reclaimed, not because the other person refuses, but because you disqualified yourself. In Blackthorn territory, Jennifer stood on a hill overlooking the valley. Her sons chased each other below, laughter bright against the wind. Ronan approached silently beside her. "He sent a messenger," Ronan said calmly. She didn't turn. What did he want? "A meeting." She almost smiled. "And?" I declined. Now she turned slightly. "Why?" Ronan's silver eyes met hers. Because if he had something worth saying, he would have said it when it mattered. A quiet warmth filled her chest. Not pride, not vengeance, but peace. She looked at her sons, at the life she carried, at the alpha who chose her without conditions, and realized something beautifully simple. Jareth had not lost her tonight. He had lost her 5 years ago. Tonight was merely the moment he finally understood it. And in Moonridge, as dusk settled once more, Jareth stood alone beneath the same moon that once witnessed his rejection. Only now, it felt colder, because ambition may build power, but it does not build loyalty. And he had learned that truth too late. The messenger arrived at dawn. Blackthorn warriors escorted him through the outer gates, their expressions unreadable. He was young, nervous, carrying the Moonridge insignia with far less confidence than it once commanded. Jennifer watched from the balcony as he dismounted. The morning sun stretched across the valley, soft gold light touching everything except the tension in the air. Ronan stood beside her. "He insisted," Ronan said calmly, "said he would not leave without speaking to you." Jennifer's fingers rested lightly against the balcony railing. "Jareth. Of course. Regret rarely sleeps well." She exhaled slowly. "Let him enter." Ronan did not question her decision. He simply nodded once. Minutes later, Jareth Draven stepped into Blackthorn territory, and for the first time in his life, he felt like the lesser wolf. Blackthorn pack members did not bow to him. They did not step aside nervously. They observed him, measured him, as if deciding whether he deserved to stand there at all. The contrast to Moonridge stung. He had always carried authority easily. Here, it meant nothing. Ronan met him at the main courtyard. Tall, composed, unshaken. "You have 5 minutes," Ronan said evenly. Jareth bristled at the tone. But this wasn't his territory, and he wasn't foolish enough to challenge Blackthorn's alpha on his own land. "I came to speak to Jennifer," Jareth said. Ronan's gaze sharpened slightly. "You will speak respectfully." It wasn't a warning shouted. It was a boundary stated. Jareth nodded stiffly. Jennifer entered moments later. She wore a simple, deep blue gown, her hair braided loosely over one shoulder. No crown, no exaggerated display of status. She didn't need one. Her presence alone was enough. Jareth hadn't truly prepared himself for this. Seeing her at Moonridge had shaken him. Seeing her here, in her element, at ease, it unsettled him deeper. She did not look like someone haunted by the past. She looked rooted, steady, whole. "Jennifer," he said quietly. She inclined her head slightly. "Beta." The formality cut. He noticed immediately. "You don't have to call me that." Her gaze didn't waver. "It is what you are. Not Jareth. Not former mate. A title. A distance." He swallowed. "I came to apologize." The word hung awkwardly between them. Ronan remained several steps away, close enough to intervene, far enough to allow her autonomy. Jennifer studied Jareth's face. He looked tired, not physically, but internally. The arrogance that once defined him felt thinner. "For what?" she asked gently. Jareth hesitated. "For how I handled the ceremony." She didn't react. "For publicly humiliating you." Still nothing. "For not questioning the healer." There it was. Truth. Her voice remained calm. "You did not question it because it served you." Jareth's jaw flexed. "Yes," he admitted quietly. The honesty surprised even him. Ronan's eyes flickered slightly at that. Jennifer tilted her head. "And if I had been Barren?" she asked softly. The question landed heavily. Jareth didn't answer immediately, because the answer mattered. "If you truly couldn't conceive," she continued, "would you still have rejected me?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Silence stretched painfully. Finally, "Yes." The word came out low, barely audible, but it was real. Something inside Jennifer settled completely. No illusion left. No lingering "what if." Just clarity. "Then your apology is not for rejecting me," she said gently. "It is for being wrong about the reason." Jareth flinched slightly. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't attacking. She was precise. Ronan watched her carefully. Not intervening. Not directing. Just witnessing. Jareth took a breath. "I thought I was making the right decision for my future." "And now?" she asked. He looked at her fully. "At the time, I believed strength meant securing heirs." His gaze flickered toward Ronan briefly. "Now I realize strength also means loyalty." The admission cost him. Jennifer nodded slowly. "Yes, it does." Another pause. "I did love you," Jareth added suddenly. The words were desperate now, like a man trying to hold on to something already slipping through his fingers. She didn't react emotionally, didn't tremble, didn't look wounded. "I know," she replied softly. And that answer startled him more than anger would have. "You knew?" "Yes." She stepped closer, not intimately, just enough to speak clearly. "You loved me, but you loved power more." The truth again. Simple. Unavoidable. Jareth felt it settle like weight against his chest. "You found someone stronger," he said quietly, glancing at Ronan. Jennifer's eyes softened slightly. "I found someone who did not measure my worth by what my body could produce." The distinction mattered. Ronan's posture remained steady. He did not puff with pride. He did not smirk. He simply stood certain in what he already knew. Jareth's voice lowered. "Is there any chance?" He couldn't even finish the sentence. But he didn't need to. Jennifer understood, and she smiled faintly. Not mocking, not triumphant, just kind. "No." One word. Clear, final. Not because she hated him, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had grown beyond him. "You are not my enemy, Jareth," she added gently. "You are my lesson." The words weren't meant to wound, but they did, because lessons are not reclaimed. They are outgrown. Jareth stood there for several seconds, absorbing that reality. The silence between them was not angry. It was finished. Ronan stepped forward slightly. "The 5 minutes are over." Jareth looked at Jennifer one last time. At the woman he once dismissed. At the peace in her eyes. At the strength in her stance. And understood something painful. If she had begged. If she had cried. If she had shown even a trace of lingering attachment. He might have felt justified. But she hadn't. She had simply moved on. "I wish you happiness," he said quietly. And this time, he meant it. Jennifer inclined her head. "I already have it." Jareth nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the gates. No dramatic farewell. No confrontation. Just acceptance. When he disappeared beyond Blackthorn's border, the air felt lighter. Ronan looked at her. "Are you at peace?" he asked softly. She considered the question carefully, then nodded. "Yes?" He stepped closer, brushing his thumb gently against her cheek. "Good." Not because she chose him, but because she chose herself. Below them, their son's laughter echoed across the valley. Life. Legacy. Love built on choice, not ambition. And far away, in Moonridge territory, Jareth finally understood something the moon had tried to teach him years ago. Power without loyalty is hollow, and love measured by utility is never strong enough to last. But some realizations arrived too late. Moonridge had never felt so divided. The rejection of a mate could be forgotten. A failed ceremony could be excused. But public humiliation? And the exposure of poor judgment? That lingered. Jareth walked through the central courtyard days after his visit to Blackthorn, feeling the difference immediately. Wolves who once stepped aside with admiration now stepped aside with caution. Not disrespect, but doubt. And doubt was far more dangerous. The elders requested a private council meeting. That alone was unusual. Jareth entered the chamber with controlled composure, but he could sense the shift. Elder Marcus spoke first. "Your actions have caused instability." Jareth kept his voice even. "My personal matters do not weaken Moonridge." "They do when they affect alliances," another elder replied sharply. The name Blackthorn hung unspoken between them. Moonridge had once been considered equal in strength to Ronan's territory. Now, the comparison felt unbalanced. "You rejected a loyal mate publicly," Elder Marcus continued, "then nearly sealed another bond without transparency. Our warriors are questioning your judgment." Jareth's jaw tightened. "I acted in the interest of the pack." "Did you?" Marcus asked calmly. "Or in the interest of your ambition?" The room fell silent, because everyone knew the truth. Jareth had always aimed for alpha, always calculated the steps, and Jennifer had once been a strategic piece in that future. When she no longer fit the vision, he removed her. Now the consequences were circling back. "We are not removing you," Marcus said after a long pause, "but you must restore confidence." Restore confidence. In leadership, perception was everything, and Jareth's image had cracked. Meanwhile, Blackthorn territory thrived. Not loudly, not boastfully, just steadily. Ronan stood overlooking a map table inside the war hall. Several advisors gathered around. Trade routes were expanding. Smaller neighboring packs had begun requesting protection alliances, not because Ronan demanded loyalty, but because he embodied stability. Jennifer entered quietly, listening as one of the advisors spoke. "Moonridge's instability benefits us," the advisor said carefully. "We could push for dominance." Ronan's gaze didn't shift from the map. "We will not exploit internal weakness." The advisor blinked. "It would secure regional control." "It would breed resentment," Ronan corrected calmly. Power, in his mind, was not about crushing rivals. It was about strengthening foundations. Jennifer watched him with quiet admiration. This was the difference. Jareth had chased power. Ronan carried it. Effortlessly. When the meeting ended, she approached him. You could claim superiority now, she said softly. Ronan turned to her. And prove Jareth right about ambition? Her lips curved faintly. You are nothing alike. His expression softened slightly. That is the point. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Moonridge's instability is their lesson to learn, not ours to weaponize. Respect. Even for a rival. That was leadership. Back in Moonridge, unrest grew quietly. 2 senior warriors resigned from Jareth's inner circle. Not openly rebellious, but distant. Celine's family withdrew their support entirely. Trade negotiations with a Western pack stalled. All small fractures. But fractures spread. Jareth trained harder, spoke more decisively, attempted to project strength. But confidence forced is never convincing. One evening, as he stood near the border cliffs, he saw movement below. A small Blackthorn patrol passing through neutral territory. Strong, disciplined, unbothered. The contrast stung. He thought about his conversation with Jennifer. You are my lesson. The words echoed more than any insult. He had expected anger, expected her to throw pain back at him. Instead, she had given him something worse. Calm detachment. And Ronan. That Alpha had not gloated, not taunted, not provoked, which somehow made the comparison sharper. Because Ronan didn't need to prove superiority. It was evident. Jareth stared across the valley for a long time. For the first time in years, he questioned something he once believed unshakable. Was becoming Alpha truly strength? If it required sacrificing loyalty? Days later, an unexpected request arrived in Blackthorn territory. Moonridge sought a formal meeting. Not personal. Political. Ronan read the parchment once, then handed it to Jennifer. They want alliance talks, she observed. They want stability, Ronan corrected. Moonridge needed external reassurance to steady internal doubt. If Blackthorn agreed publicly to partnership, it would restore Jareth's image. Jennifer looked up at him. What will you do? Ronan didn't answer immediately. Because the decision was delicate, too much dominance would humiliate Moonridge. Too much generosity would appear naive. Finally, we will meet, he said calmly, but on neutral ground. Balance. Always balance. The meeting was arranged beneath the ancient oak marking shared borders. Jareth arrived with 2 elders. Ronan arrived with measured confidence. Jennifer did not attend. This was not about past emotion. This was about leadership. Jareth and Ronan faced each other once more. No tension crackled. No hostility flared. Just 2 leaders standing across from one another. Moonridge seeks mutual security, Jareth began evenly. Blackthorn offers stability, not control, Ronan replied. The subtle phrasing mattered. Control was domination. Stability was partnership. Elder Marcus spoke next. We acknowledge missteps. We aim to strengthen relations. Ronan's silver eyes rested briefly on Jareth. A leader grows by acknowledging error. Jareth held his gaze. I am learning. It was not submission. It was honesty, and Ronan respected that. The agreement formed slowly. Trade protection. Border defense cooperation. No territorial interference. When the meeting ended, Jareth remained behind for a moment. Why didn't you humiliate us? He asked quietly. Ronan's expression remained unreadable. Because strength is not proven by exploiting weakness. The words landed heavily. Jareth nodded once. Take care of her, he said after a pause. Ronan's answer was immediate. I already do. No challenge. No insecurity. Just fact. When Ronan returned home, Jennifer met him near the hill where their sons were sparring playfully with wooden blades. Well? She asked softly. It is done. She searched his face. No dominance? No humiliation. Her smile was small but warm. You could have crushed him. Ronan looked toward the horizon. I am not interested in crushing men who already understand their mistakes. That was the difference again. Jareth had once thought leadership meant rising above others. Ronan understood it meant rising above ego. Below them, one of the twins tripped during sparring. The other immediately helped him up. No mockery. No ridicule. Just instinctive support. Jennifer watched with quiet pride. They learn from what they see, she murmured. Ronan followed her gaze. Yes, and what they saw was strength without cruelty, power without arrogance, love without conditions. In Moonridge, Jareth stood before his warriors days later, announcing the alliance with Blackthorn. Murmurs shifted, not admiration restored, but trust, slowly rebuilding. He was learning. Too late for Jennifer, but perhaps not too late for his leadership. And far away, beneath a peaceful sky, Jennifer realized something quietly profound. Closure had not destroyed Jareth. It had forced him to grow. And growth, even born from regret, was better than pride left untouched. But her story? It no longer belonged to Moonridge. It belonged to the future she carried. And that future was stronger than any title. The valley was quiet that evening. A soft, golden sunset stretched across Blackthorn territory, painting the hills in warm light. The air smelled of pine and earth, calm and steady like the pack itself. Below the main ridge, the twins were training again. Not formally, not under pressure, just instinctively pushing each other. One lunged too fast. The other pivoted smoothly and countered. They were too young to fully understand dominance, but it lived inside them already, sharp, bright, undeniable. Jennifer watched from the wooden terrace of their home. Her hand rested lightly over her abdomen again, not out of habit this time, but reflection. 4 years ago, she had believed her body incapable of carrying life. Now she watched her sons move like small storms gathering strength. Destiny had not only corrected the lie, it had rewritten her future entirely. "You're thinking too loudly," Ronan's voice came from behind her. She didn't turn immediately. She smiled. "I do that sometimes." He stepped beside her, tall and solid, his presence grounding without overwhelming. His shoulder brushed hers lightly, not claiming, not demanding. Just there. She tilted her head slightly toward him. "They look like you when they move." Ronan watched the boys carefully. "They look like you when they refuse to fall?" A quiet warmth spread through her chest. There was no exaggeration in his words. No romantic performance. Ronan never used grand declarations. He spoke in truth. And truth carried weight. Below them, one of the twins lost balance and fell into the dirt. There was a brief pause. Then, instead of frustration, the boy laughed. The other extended a hand and pulled him up. No mocking. No dominant struggle. Just instinctive unity. Jennifer exhaled softly. "They are strong," she said. "Yes," Ronan agreed. A beat of silence passed. "But strength is not what I value most." She looked at him. "What is?" He didn't hesitate. "The way they protect each other." Her throat tightened slightly. That instinct had not been taught through fear. It had grown through example, through watching their parents move with respect instead of rivalry, through witnessing partnership instead of pride. "You've given them stability," she said quietly. Ronan turned his gaze toward her now. "You have." She frowned faintly. "I was the one who came here broken." "You were never broken." The certainty in his tone left no space for argument. She studied his face carefully. "Why did you help me?" she asked after a moment. It wasn't insecurity. It was curiosity. Ronan leaned lightly against the railing. "You crossed into my territory dying." "That's not what I mean." He was silent for a moment. Then, "I saw a wolf who had been discarded for the wrong reasons." "And that bothered you?" "Yes." "Why?" His silver eyes met hers fully now. "Because leaders who discard loyalty create weakness." She blinked. He wasn't speaking about Jareth. Not directly. He was speaking about principle. "And because?" She pressed softly. Ronan's voice lowered slightly. "Because you did not beg." The words surprised her. "You walked away with dignity," he continued. "Even in pain." She hadn't realized he had seen that strength. At the time, she had felt only shattered. "You treated me like I still had value," she whispered. "I treated you like you are." The distinction mattered. Jennifer's heart swelled quietly. There had never been a dramatic confession between them. No explosive declaration beneath the moon. Their bond had grown slowly. Through respect, through trust, through everyday choice. The twins began running toward the terrace now, faces flushed from exertion. "Mother!" one of them called. "Did you see that move?" Ronan crossed his arms casually. "I saw you leave your left side open." The boy groaned. Jennifer laughed softly. And in that small, ordinary exchange, she felt something deeper than passion. Peace. Later that evening, after the twins had fallen asleep tangled in blankets and exhaustion, Jennifer stepped outside alone. The moon hung high and luminous, different from the one that once witnessed her rejection. Or perhaps she was simply different now. Ronan joined her quietly. He stood close, not touching, but near enough that warmth radiated between them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Taking me in." He turned his head slowly toward her. "No, not hesitation, not thought, just certainty." "You brought complications," she added softly. "You brought loyalty," he corrected. She looked at him carefully. "You didn't know I could bear children." "I didn't need to." Her breath caught slightly. He stepped closer now, gently brushing his fingers against her wrist. "I did not choose you for heirs," he said quietly. "I chose you because you stood even when it hurt." The words struck deep. Jareth had once said he needed sons. Ronan had chosen her before, knowing she could give them. That difference shaped everything. She rested her forehead lightly against his chest. For a moment, they simply stood like that. No urgency, no fire, just connection. "You know," she murmured, "if I had been barren, truly," he tilted his head slightly. "Yes, I would have still stayed." His hand slid gently to her waist. "And I would have still chosen you." There was no dramatic vow, no raised voices, just quiet truth beneath the moon. Below them, the valley stretched wide and steady, strong not because it conquered, but because it endured. Jennifer thought about Moonridge briefly, about Jareth learning slowly, about a pack rebuilding trust. She felt no resentment, only distance. Her story no longer revolved around rejection. It revolved around choice. And every day, Ronan chose her. Not for heirs, not for alliance, not for status, but for who she was when stripped of everything else. A wolf who refused to crumble completely. A woman who walked away rather than beg. A heart that healed without becoming bitter. The twins stirred faintly inside the house. Ronan glanced toward the door instinctively. Protective. Always. She smiled. "They'll grow into powerful alphas one day." "Yes," he agreed. "But before that, they will grow into good men." She looked at him. "And that is your doing." He shook his head slightly. "No, that is ours." The word again. Ours. Partnership. Shared responsibility. Shared strength. The moonlight bathed them softly, as silence settled between them, not empty, but full. 5 years ago, she had knelt beneath a different moon, believing her life had ended. Tonight, she stood beneath this one, knowing it had only begun. Some bonds are dictated by fate, others are chosen deliberately, and the chosen ones are always stronger. Years passed quietly in Blackthorn territory, not in chaos, not in spectacle, but in steady strength. The twins grew taller, broader in shoulder, sharper in instinct. Their silver eyes no longer held only innocence, they carried awareness now. The pack watched them with admiration, not fear. They were alpha-born, but more importantly, they were well-raised. Jennifer stood on the same ridge she had once watched them spar as children. Now they trained below with seasoned warriors, holding their ground with discipline rather than ego. She remembered the night she had left Moonridge, snow falling, heart shattered, identity torn from her chest. Back then, she believed rejection defined her. Now, she understood something deeper. Rejection had refined her. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to turn. "Watching them again?" Ronan asked. "Always." He stepped beside her, taller somehow with the passing years, yet unchanged in essence. Calm, controlled, grounded. "Your eldest nearly overpowered Darius today," Ronan said mildly. Jennifer smiled faintly. And did he? No, Ronan replied. He stopped himself. She looked at him. Why? He noticed Darius was off balance. Her chest swelled quietly. Restraint. Compassion inside strength. That had not come from dominance. That had come from example. Ronan's gaze shifted toward her. You did well. She laughed softly. So did you. Silence stretched comfortably between them. In the distance, one of the twins glanced up toward the ridge and raised a hand. Jennifer lifted hers in return. There was no fear in her heart anymore. No lingering echo of the word Barren. The shame had dissolved long ago. Blackthorn flourished. The alliance with Moonridge remained stable. Jareth had never remarried. Not out of lingering attachment, but because leadership had consumed him differently now. He had learned. Slowly, and from a distance. He had sent formal congratulations when news of the twins' first public shift spread across territories. Ronan never responded personally. He didn't need to. Respect had replaced rivalry. And that was enough. One evening, as golden dusk settled across the valley, the twins approached the ridge. They no longer ran to her as small boys. They walked with controlled confidence. Mother, the younger one said. The Southern Border Patrol reported increased rogue movement. Jennifer exchanged a brief glance with Ronan. Serious matters now entered their lives. Handled? Ronan asked calmly. Yes, the elder twin answered. We reinforced without escalation. Ronan nodded once. Approval. Earned. The boys hesitated before leaving. Mother, the younger one added softly. Is it true you once lived in Moonridge? The question hung gently in the air. Jennifer didn't stiffen. Didn't avoid it. Yes. Why did you leave? She looked toward the horizon where distant hills marked that old territory. Because sometimes, she said carefully, the place you begin is not the place you are meant to grow. The twins listened closely. You were unhappy? The elder asked. I was misplaced. The distinction mattered. They absorbed that quietly. And here? The younger one asked. She smiled. Here I bloomed. They seemed satisfied with that answer. When they left, Ronan turned to her slowly. You could have told them more. I will, she replied. When they are ready to understand it. He nodded. That was her way. Truth, without bitterness. Lesson, without venom. Later that night, beneath a wide silver moon, Jennifer walked alone through the gardens. The same moon that once watched her kneel in humiliation. The same moon that had witnessed her pain. But it felt different now. Not colder. Not cruel. Just constant. She understood it at last. The moon does not curse. It reveals. It reveals who chooses ambition over loyalty. It reveals who measures worth by utility. And it reveals who sees value even when the world does not. Ronan approached quietly once more. He always seemed to know when her thoughts ran deep. You're far away, he murmured. Not far, she replied. Just remembering. He waited. She turned toward him fully. If I hadn't been rejected? He shook his head gently. Don't. She tilted her head slightly. Why? Because that path would have made you smaller. The honesty in his tone made her inhale softly. You think so? Yes. He stepped closer, resting his hands lightly at her waist. You would have tried to prove yourself constantly, to earn what should have been given freely. The truth settled deeply. He wasn't wrong. With Jareth, she had always felt like she needed to be more. Better. Enough. With Ronan, she simply was. You never asked me to prove anything, she whispered. You never needed to. Their foreheads touched lightly. Not dramatic. Not consuming. Just steady. I am grateful, she said softly. For what? For being planted here. Ronan's thumb brushed against her cheek gently. You were never barren, he said. She smiled faintly. No, she wasn't. She had simply been placed in soil that did not nourish her. And when she found the right ground, she flourished. Her sons would grow into powerful alphas. But more importantly, they would grow into men who did not discard loyalty for ambition. Men who did not measure love by inheritance. Men who understood that strength is not proven by dominance, but by protection. Years from now, stories would be told of Blackthorn's prosperity, of the Alpha who ruled with calm authority, of the Luna who once walked away from humiliation and returned unbroken. But Jennifer did not care for stories. She cared for the life unfolding before her, the laughter inside their home, the respect in her son's voices, the quiet certainty in Ronan's presence. Once, she had thought rejection ended her story. Now she knew. It had only redirected it. Some losses are not punishments. They are protection. And some endings are simply the beginning of something stronger. Under the wide, watching moon, Jennifer Vale stood not as a rejected Barren mate, not as someone's mistake, but as a woman who chose herself and was chosen in return. And that was her true legacy.